Hi folks, I'm Sandeep Patil, IBM STSM and Master Inventor, and I'm here with my colleague and friend Mandar Vaidya, who is a solution architect, and we work for IBM Storage Lab. It's always a pleasure to talk at the SNIA SDC conference. One of the reasons that I have always liked to speak at the SDC conference is because we are like brothers from another mother in the same storage family, trying to share insights and take the industry forward. Having said that, today the world is hit by pandemic. We all are impacted. The human race has been impacted by a virus. And coincidentally, Mandar and I are going to talk about proactive threat detection and safeguarding of data for enhanced cyber resiliency, which is more of a virus or a cyber incident attack that happens on an IT infrastructure. So let's get started. So why should we, the developers, care? Now, there was some kind of humor that I ran into, and I thought I should share that. I had my manager call me the other day, right? And he said, "Hey, Sandeep, there is a virus on my computer, but I just can't figure out where it go." And I just pulled his leg saying, "Hey, it ran somewhere." Similarly, you see humors in the internet floating around when I asked the police how the hackers got away, they responded, "I don't know. They ran somewhere." The WannaCry, which was the ransomware that actually made a lot of people cry. There's a joke floating, says, how did the WannaCry hackers get away? And the answer is, we don't know. They ran somewhere. In a nutshell, ransomware and similar cyber attacks are creating news and havoc. And they have started becoming from jokes to actually impacting businesses and resulting in business losses. So it is time for us, the developer community, to take it seriously and do something of it. And this kind of presentation will revolve around what we developers can do in storage with frugal innovation and mindset. So what's the agenda for today? I'll talk about cyber resiliency overview. I'll take you through the NIST cyber security framework. Then I'll hand it over to Mandar, where he'll get into the solutions once I've explained the problem, where he'll take you into what is the SIEM overview, what is exactly SIEM, and integration of storage and SIEM, what's the innovative solution that we want to share with our developers. And finally, we will conclude. So let's get started with cyber resiliency overview. Now, this is a chart which should kind of tell us why we, storage, are in center of all of this. A lot of us have already heard that data has become the new oil. In my personal opinion, data is the new crown jewel of any organization or business. And apparently there's a massive data that's being formulated, which can result, if you do the analytics properly, to get you meaningful and a lot of insights. And you can generate a lot of value. A lot of businesses have actually been established on mining the data, inciting the business values out of it. Now, where does this data reside? The data resides these days everywhere, right? It's on private cloud, public cloud, hybrid storage, on-prem, multi-cloud. But where does it actually reside? It resides on what we all work on, the storage. So data becomes a very important aspect, and storage, which is hosting the data, become even more important. Then when we look at what are the challenges that the organization are facing, the organizations are facing significant cybersecurity challenges. Here are some of the numbers that I picked up. You see almost 3.86 million is the cost of a data breach based on analyst report. If you looked at WannaCry, which I said made a lot of us cry, a lot of industries and organizations cry, there's almost a loss of 8 billion. And so this all boils, and similarly are set of other ransomware attacks like the NotPetya, the PETA, etc. And there's also this important statistics. It roughly takes around 206 days to actually understand when the actual attack really started. And now this all boils down to the risk. What is the risk appetite of an organization and how you plan based on the risk that you're willing to take? So what is the takeaway? I think cybersecurity has become a must-have implementation in any data centers because the cyber attacks have been increasing. In fact, I was reading a blog the other day. During the pandemic, the cyber attacks has almost multifolded in the last 3 to 5 months. Then there was another survey that was taken by an analyst where the board of directors were asked, what is your biggest challenge, right? Which of the following do you find challenging in your role as a director of this board? And almost 37%, which was top in the rank, said keeping on top of risk and security issues. So the takeaway here is cybersecurity is one of the predominant challenge in the industry. And if you really see, most of these attacks, most of the cyber events actually revolve around data. It's either for the bad guys to steal the data, it is either for the bad guys to get access to the data, it's either for the bad guys to make sure that the data is not available. A lot of these actually revolve around data. Now, there comes cyber resiliency. What is cyber resiliency? Cyber resiliency is an ability of an organization to continue delivering the intended outcome despite adverse events. And I'm going to get into details of it. But this kind of sets a stage saying, hey, you know what, data is important. There's a lot of cyber incidents that's happening. They are all revolving around data. Data is residing on storage, right? And we need to make the overall organization cyber resilient. So how can storage start participating more meaningfully? So then when we move on next, what typically comes up is, what is the difference between cyber security and cyber resiliency? So quickly, I've tried to list here. Security is typically, in an analogy, you lock your doors. When you lock your door, what you do is you prevent an intruder, you prevent an malicious user to enter your particular home. Then you have prevention, right? What is prevention? It's about trying to keep the bad actors, you're trying to keep the thief or the bandits out of your house or out of your environment in the first place. It's like keeping a watchman at your door and trying to make sure no thief can actually enter your house. Both security and prevention together kind of form cybersecurity. Then comes resiliency. Resiliency is that what happens if my locks are broken? How quickly can I recover, right? How can I get to the state back where I was? And that's where also recovery comes, where it says that once the bad actors are in, does the organization have the means to recover quickly and continue the business operation? So typically cyber resiliency and cyber recovery go hand in hand together. If I have to give a very naive analogy, when a virus attacks a human body, in order for you to prevent a virus from attacking it, what would you do? You typically take vaccine. That's prevention. But let us say if a virus has attacked your body, what do? You tend to take antibiotics. That's recovery and trying to be resilient now that you have been impacted. So that's a very naive analogy of cybersecurity versus cyber resiliency. So what does NIST define cyber resiliency as? And I don't want to kind of tamper with the definition because it's very well put. Cyber resiliency is the ability to anticipate, withstand, recover from, and adapt to adverse conditions, stresses, attacks, or compromise on the system that use or are enabled by cyber resources. So very well put as to what cyber resiliency is in a one line. So now that we understand the difference between cyber security and cyber resiliency, one would say, where does storage come into picture in these two plays? Predominantly, storage comes into picture in cyber resiliency and cyber recovery. But I think in this proposal, what we want to say is it's important for us to play with the cyber security players or the ecosystem, which predominantly looks into the security and prevention and how we can interlock to get a true cyber resilient solution. Moving on, another question that comes up once we understand what is cyber resiliency is, hey, how does business continuity, cyber resiliency, and disaster recovery differ from each other? And are they different? And the answer really is yes and no. And that's why you see these three circles kind of overlap each other. A typical DR is actually meant where you take backup, snapshot, replication when there is a disaster that happens and you need to go to a DR site. That's where a typical DR location comes into picture. But cyber resiliency actually takes it one step forward. Surely you require all the attributes of disaster recovery, but you have to add attributes like isolation, attributes like immutability, attributes like granularity of management of data. Why? That's because it could happen if you have a traditional DR that if your primary data is impacted by a cyber event, or say like a ransomware, it could percolate into your DR location as well. And then it's matter of time, as soon as your primary location goes down, just matter of time, your DR location is going to go down. As opposed to a cyber resilient infrastructure, this should be able to be taken care of. So this is a basic difference between people ask when cyber resilient based DR versus a normal DR. And surely both of them kind of contribute and help business continuity. So now with this background, let's go into NIST, the cybersecurity framework. Now NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, has defined this very beautiful framework called cybersecurity framework, which a lot of organizations who are serious into business, irrespective of their size, should follow or are already following. And this framework, if you see, is divided into 5 parts. The first one is identify. It's very important for us to identify what are our key assets. What is that, if impacted, my business will get severely impacted. So it can't be all of your resources. It has to be a certain subset of your entire set of resources. So what is that most important asset? That is where the identification phase comes in. And more often than not, a lot of these important assets would revolve around data. But once it's not all data, you'll have to identify which is that data, which is your key assets. So identification phase of a NIST framework revolves around exactly to identify these important assets. Then comes the protect phase. The protect phase is important and is responsible to safeguard the assets that were identified in the previous phase. So it involves both technical safeguards and physical security safeguards. But it's about protection of your key assets, which is protection of your data. When assuming data is your key assets, which as we have kind of explained earlier. Then comes detect. Now detect is a very important function which implements a measure and alerts an organization of cyber attacks. So if there are cyber attacks that happen, detection is a phase which has to detect if there is any kind of impact on your most important assets that you're trying to protect. So that is about the detection phase. Then comes the respond. What happens if there is a cyber attack is detected? Right? Surely you have to measure how much you are impacted, but how do you respond as a business? How do you respond as a process? How do you respond as storage functionalities? And finally is recover. Right? Recover is an activity or a function that implements of how you are going to have your cyber resilient infrastructure get back into your business. Ensure business continuity in the event of cyber attack, security breach, or other cyber security events. So recovery is about how you can quickly get back into action if you are attacked, let's say by a cyber incident. So this is the 5 stage of NIST framework. Now that we have identified these 5 phases of NIST framework, the question is, me as a storage developer or from a storage developer perspective, where is the problem? How can we contribute? So quickly as a storage developer, what is my takeaway? 1, data is one of the critical assets for cyber resiliency and NIST framework. Where does data reside? It resides on storage. 2, solutions from cyber resiliency are spread across domains, which typically led by security-based offerings. And many times these security-based offerings may not be data-centric. 3, tying back to the first point, while data is a critical asset, where is data residing? It is residing on storage. So storage becomes a central pivot point. And lastly, if you combine all this together, there is a need for a tighter integration of storage and the security offerings or the security functions which cater to the identify, protect, detect to come up with an enhanced cyber resilient solution for the industry. So this is what me as a storage developer takes as a problem or a challenge that we need to fix. So now putting our innovative cap and making sure we do frugal innovation, right? We are going to follow the frugal innovation principles where we are not going to change the entire design principles of our storage, but it's about what we more or less have it with us already designed. How do we frugally innovate? How can we innovate in a way that from a storage infrastructure point of view, we are able to proactively secure our organization's crown jewel, which is the data? Going back to the NIST framework, can we integrate the identification, the detection in such a way that it kind of bridges with respond and recovery so that the overall solution becomes more resilient? So this is the problem that we took, and I'm going to hand it over to Mandar, who is going to then take and do a deep dive into the solution and explain how this particular problem can be solved through frugal innovation from a storage point of view. Over to you, Mandar.
Thank you, Sandeep, for emphasizing importance of data, cybersecurity, and cyber resiliency for our organizations. Hello, my name is Mandar Vaidya, and I am the Storage Solutions Architect for IBM Storage Lab. Currently, I am working on various cyber resiliency solutions with IBM Storage. Let's look into the key value proposition for this solution integration. Like Sandeep has mentioned, there has been growing impact of cyber and ransomware attacks to the organizations. And it has increased during this pandemic period where we see more and more cyber and ransomware attacks on the organization's infrastructure. It's happening all over the world. Talking about India, recently famous snacks chain Haldiram was attacked and attackers asked for a huge ransom. Similarly, Dr. Reddy's labs was also impacted by the cyber attack. These attacks increase the requirement to protect against the cyber events and early threat detection to protect the data. Intruders are thinking about new and new ways to intrude into your system and steal your data. Similarly, we need to be alert and think about the enhanced cyber resiliency solutions which can proactively detect the threats and protect our all-important data. Integration with security solutions such as security information and event management, commonly known as SIEM, helps us to monitor and manage our infrastructure proactively against the cyber and ransomware attacks. This solution integration can plug into existing SIEM infrastructure to increase the overall security posture of the organization. Typically, storage systems can handle 4 dimensions of NIST cybersecurity framework, namely identify, protect, recover, and respond. This solution integration of storage with SIEM engine can help us to bridge the gap of detect phase of NIST cybersecurity framework. Let's look into the quick SIEM overview and leading SIEM providers. Security information and event management systems provides enterprise security professionals insights of the activities inside their organization. It provides the real-time security event management for cybersecurity, and it has ability to track all the activities within the IT organization. It goes beyond the traditional log monitoring and management softwares to provide centralized security posture for the organization and helps in early threat detection and protection against the cyber and ransomware attacks. So how does exactly SIEM software works? Typically, SIEM software collects and aggregates the log data generated from the organization's appliances, hosts, and IT infrastructures and security devices such as firewalls, antivirus filters. The software then identifies and categorizes incidents and events and analyzes them. It delivers two main objectives. It provides security reports on the malware activities, unidentified incidents, and successful and failed login attempts, and then subsequent user activities based on the data received and analyzed by the security system. It also sends alerts and responses in case any breach is observed against the predefined rules, indicating potential security breach. SIEM has the ability to provide the separate security dashboards as per the categories, and it helps users monitor the activities more effectively. It has the ability to analyze the data using the advanced AI techniques using own capabilities or plug in using external AI systems. It thereby provides more deeper insights of the data. Real-time analysis provides the effective threat monitoring and event correlation, and thereby providing appropriate incident response to the offenses and protecting the environment against the security breach attempts. The figure on the left-hand side indicates this year's Gartner's report and provides the insights into the leading SIEM providers based on their features and capabilities. As per this report, IBM QRadar and Splunk are leading SIEM providers based on their adoption and capabilities to provide effective threat monitoring and response to the security incidents. Before we look into the solution components and architectural overview, let's look into the key aspects of file and object storage, which makes this solution integration with SIEM software more effective. As we know, file and object storage provides storage for unstructured data, which is growing at the tremendous pace. Due to various social platforms, most of the data generated through various locations and from the various users. It is important to safeguard such unstructured data from the cyber incidents. When looking at the file and object storage, they have defined access logs which can be used for the auditing. These logs typically provides rich metadata information such as who has generated the data and who has accessed it. Is it unauthorized user or is it the authorized user? From where this data is generated? Is it from the known or unknown location? When the data was accessed, is it accessed during the outside of the business hours? And what kind of the data has been accessed? Whether someone is trying to access the confidential data or the non-confidential data. We can use object and file storage features for determining these user activities. Objects typically have the ability to tag data via user-defined metadata. Similarly, file storages typically have the extended attributes which can be leveraged to tag files based on these various attributes. Using these file and object tags and attributes, we can get more information and insights about the data, and based on this, file and object storage support policies to categorize files and objects for confidential or non-confidential data. These key aspects of the file and object storage can be useful in integration with the SIEM software. We can send this access information to the SIEM software and get more detailed insights about the data and perform threat analysis and detection based on the security posture of the organization. Now let's look into the two different personas within the organization who have totally different perspective while looking to secure the data as per the best practices. We are talking about the storage architect or administrator and chief information security officer. Even though they work in the same organization, they have different needs as per their job roles. Typically, storage administrator or architect would like to protect the data against the cyber events. Maybe they are external or internal cyber events. Also, he would like to have as much as automation to increase the speed of the threat analysis on the data and on the storage system. He would also like to have mechanism to quickly respond to the business disruptions and recover and resume operations after the cyber events and mitigate the business impact, and thereby providing the end-to-end business resiliency across the storage enterprise and protect the data on the storage systems. Typically, CISO or security architects have different needs for the data generated within the organization. He would also like to apply the centralized security posture and controls for all the infrastructure within his organization. Typically, organizations have compliance requirements where the SIEM logs needs to be protected for the longer period. Also, these logs needs to be stored in an immutable or worm storage where the data cannot be compromised or tampered with. Typically, SIEM software licenses work on the events per second, which is also known as EPS. Hence, they need to also keep in mind licensing cost while working with archive or cold storage logs. Also, they need to maintain the end-to-end business resiliency across their organization to protect the organization's data against the cyber attacks. Hence, the solution integration, which integrates storage and security software such as SIEM, can help to proactively detect the threat on the storage systems, and SIEM can provide the rapid response to such events and protect the important data on the storage systems by providing the end-to-end resilience. Such storage integration can help in addressing the needs for both these personas, which are storage and security architects within the organization. Now let's look into the architectural overview of the proactive cyber resilience on threat detection solution. This solution can be explained in 6 simple steps. At first, storage systems, access logs or file audit logs needs to be enabled on the storage system. Typically, this is a per file system configuration. Whenever user perform any file level activity on the storage system, all these logs are audited by this access log or file audit logging mechanism. It is best practice to store these access logs in an immutable format on the storage system. It helps in preventing tampering of these important access logs by an unauthorized user on the storage system. After that, these logs are forwarded to the SIEM server using the rsyslog configuration. Typically, all the SIEM servers accept the logs using the rsyslog configuration. Once these logs are received at the SIEM server, they need to be converted into the log format understood by the SIEM server. Also, they need to be converted into the format where they need to be mapped to the SIEM identifiers. After that, rules can be configured on the SIEM server to alert any threat on the storage system. For example, if any unauthorized user who's trying to access my storage file system after the business hours, I would like to understand this activity. In case such activity is detected by the SIEM server, it alerts the administrator of the storage system. It also generates the alerts and proactively let administrator know that there is someone who's trying to access your file system outside of the business hours. Generating alert is one thing on the threat detection, but if we can go one step beyond and on detection of the threat, if we can invoke the cyber resiliency on the storage system, it would be great. You can create custom scripts inside the SIEM server, or you can create custom apps inside your SIEM server so that you can invoke cyber resiliency workflow or snapshot creation on the storage system remotely. So whenever you detect any threat, whenever SIEM server detect any threat on the storage system, it can remotely invoke the snapshot or invoke the cyber resiliency workflow by protecting the data on the storage system. This way, whenever the threat is detected by the SIEM server, you can invoke the cyber resiliency workflow on the storage system by proactively protecting the data on the storage system. Let's look into the small demo of this enhanced cyber resiliency solution using the proactive threat detection. For this demo, we are using IBM Spectrum Scale as a storage system and IBM QRadar as a SIEM server solution. For this demo, we have considered a use case when a risky user who's trying to access a Spectrum Scale file system post business hours. In such case, IBM QRadar should detect it as a potential threat and generate a snapshot on the Spectrum Scale file system. We have configured a Spectrum Scale cluster which is having 3 nodes inside our lab. File audit log has been configured on the Spectrum Scale file system. As you can see, file audit logs has been configured for the file system FS1 in this case. As I mentioned earlier, rsyslog configuration needs to be performed. So here we have configured rsyslog so that it can forward the access log to the QRadar file system. Let's look into the graphical user interface of Spectrum Scale. As you can see, FS1 has been configured and currently there are no snapshots associated with the file system FS1. On QRadar, you can see logs are received from the Spectrum Scale using the rsyslog configuration. So these events such as open file and close files are configured to the Spectrum demo log source inside the QRadar. And we have also created a custom rule using which whenever there is any event such as open file has been detected post business hours, it should execute a custom script. And in this case, our custom script is custom action is nothing but a small script which is generating the snapshot on the Spectrum Scale whenever any threat is detected on the QRadar. Now let's try to do some activity on the Spectrum Scale post business hours. As you can see, I have logged in using the user 1, which is a non-root user, and we will try to do activity after midnight, which is like outside of the business hours. So let me go to the confidential directory on the Spectrum Scale file system. Let me try to modify the existing file on the Spectrum Scale file system. So let's try to modify this file, save it. So now we have modified the file. Now let's look into the QRadar, or let's look into the Spectrum Scale. As you can see, whenever I try to modify the file, at the same time, it has immediately triggered the snapshot on the Spectrum Scale from the QRadar. Now let's see if it has preserved the contents of the original file inside my snapshot. So let me go into the snapshot and try to view the file. As you can see, this is the original file which has been preserved inside my snapshot. So this is a small demo showcasing the integration of a storage system with the SIEM server. So as to summarize this session, Sandeep has explained how important data is, and data is a crown jewel for any organization. Whenever cyber event happens, maybe they are internal or external cyber events, it not only impacts organizations financially, but it also impacts the reputation of the organization. Hence, it is important to protect our IT infrastructure and most precious data from the cyber events. Storage plays critical role in ensuring the data security as directly data resides on it. Storage systems have various features such as encryption, immutability, and control access for securing the data residing on it. Still, implementing effective cyber resiliency solution and plan as per the NIST framework helps in protecting the data against the cyber attacks. Similarly, SIEM solution helps in advanced threat detection against the cyber events. By integrating storage systems with SIEM solution can take benefits of the rich features of both storage as well as SIEM server to detect the cyber or ransomware attacks and accordingly protect the data on the storage system. Additionally, organizations can configure other devices such as servers, networking devices to send the logs to the SIEM server, and hence SIEM server can act as a centralized platform for managing the security posture of the organization. Thus, you can apply uniform policies across your infrastructure from the SIEM server. It helps in increasing the overall security posture of the organization. SIEM server typically maintains its risky user database, which is commonly known as UBA. Based on this UBA, it has ability to detect unidentified user access and detect the threats on the storage system. Additionally, SIEM servers has inherent AI capabilities or ability to plug in with external AI systems for incident and risk analysis, triage, and response. Thereby, overall solution provides the best response against the cyber events. All these SIEM servers features can be useful in detecting threats on the storage system's data, and whenever threat is detected, it can automatically trigger cyber resiliency workflow remotely on the storage system to proactively protect the data from the cyber events. With this, on behalf of Sandeep Patil and me, I would like to thank you for attending this session and understanding the key concepts of proactive cyber resilience to protect the data against the cyber events in this challenging pandemic situation. We would also like to thank SNIA India for the opportunity to present this solution integration to all of you. Please take a moment to rate this session. Your feedback is very important to us. Again, thank you and have a wonderful day.